one of the defenses that the Chinese will use for this is that 80% of all the data on here is for companies. It's not personal, because I think when we
Right.
look at this, you look at it on a personal level and you cringe. But part of this is companies not paying debts, companies doing other things, violating or going around
Yeah.
laws, and that, again, because you had mentioned there's a lack of trust, that maybe this is okay. So are you okay with this, like on a corporate level, or is it
I would
where
be
do you?
okay with it on a corporate level, yeah, because I think corporations should be more responsible to the environment, should be more responsible to the public. I mean, look at corporations in general, like multinational corporations. I'm not talking about local ones, but multinational ones. They will, on at a drop of a hat, fire everybody because they think that moving their factory to a different country, say Mexico or Vietnam, is going to be more profitable for them. It allows them to save, I don't know, 20 cents on the dollar, something like that, right? Like, I mean, that's why they, like Carrier, for example, what they opened a thing in Ohio, and then suddenly they were like, oh yeah, we're just going to shut it. We're going to build it in Mexico,
Yep.
right? And everybody lost their jobs. Like tens of thousands of people lost their jobs because they thought they could, make their their air conditioning units slightly cheaper, right? Slightly cheaper and sell it for slightly more. So that is very socially irresponsible, especially since they owe a debt of some sort to to America, really, right? And
Yep.
yet they're making all their money elsewhere.
Yep.
So I think that corporations should be held accountable for this. And now a lot of people might disagree. Like Mitt Romney, they'll say corporations are people, but I don't believe corporations are
Right.
people. I think corporations cannot exist without their workers. They cannot exist without their customers, and they should be held accountable for that. And having a system in place that keeps them accountable, because most corporations are not going to behave morally. They're not moral creatures. They don't have conscience, right? They're only their only duty is to their board of directors and to their investors.
Yeah.
That's it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And some people like that. Some people are like, oh, but that's corporations. But well, I don't have to defend it. I don't like it, right? I
Right.
think it's shitty,
And
personally.
obviously, you'd have to face the legal penalty. What I see happen in the United States a lot is, if you have a small company, let's say it's got a new product, but it's a very small company. As a big company, you could completely copy that product, violate patent laws
Yep.
intentionally, sell a lot of this, right? And then you know that you'll get sued. You probably lose, but you would have made enough money to cover
Yep.
whatever penalty you've got to pay this small company. So you just look at, well, if we can make 80 million, we'll pay 30 millions in fines. Well, it makes
Yep.
50 million. Let's do it. But it's still not ethical. And it seems like that's what the
No, it's not.
Chinese, the defense is for that. They said specifically, and this is a quote from a Chinese official, that companies who have sophisticated internal control mechanism of ensuring compliance, such as adherence to environmental regulation, for example, will see benefits. Companies who have previously been notorious avoiders of such regulations will see harsher punishments in the future, forcing them to adapt.
Yeah, I think that's fair because a lot of Chinese companies are very poorly regulated. Even though the regulations exist, they're not enforced. They're very, very, very difficult to enforce because, at the end of the day, if they flout the regulation, nothing really happens to them, right? They just pay a small fine. They can afford it. They pay a fine of, say, $1 million or even $10 million. It's hardly a dent. I mean, these are billion-dollar corporations that are making, in each quarter they're making a few $1 billion. They can afford a $50 million fine, $100 million fine. I mean, look at the way that Yahoo, for example, in America. I mean, these guys basically leaked all the information of their customers to to hackers by accident, right? And they covered it up for years, right? All their servers, on Flickr.com, on Yahoo.com, all those emails, they were not good. They're not well protected, and people had their information stolen. Some people got blackmailed. Some people had their nudes leaked, and all these things. And Yahoo didn't have to, really pay anything. And now, they're offering like small compensations to people depending on how much was stolen. Like I think they offered me like $500. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll take the $500 because I didn't really lose anything. But a lot of people, like businesses, for example, I mean, they might have had trade secrets stolen that were worth millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't know, right? Thanks, Yahoo.
Yeah.
Now, Yahoo can keep doing business. They can keep doing whatever because, as much as money as they're paying people, it's still not going to amount to however much money was lost, right? They just settle in a class action lawsuit. That's what they're doing or have done.
Yeah.
So China's the same way, but multiply that by however many Chinese corporations there are. And, you can understand why the Chinese government would want to incentivize good behavior and penalize really, really bad behavior. Yeah.
And now, would there be incentives for companies to lie about each other then to try to manipulate the system?
I think, yeah, but that's why you have safeguards in place, right? You have auditors. Like, in the US, you've got the, what do you like, the IRS, right? They send in auditors, and then, like basically, let's say you run a casino. I've been watching Ozark. Now, let's say you run a casino, it's in your interest to basically bankrupt the other guy, right? And having an auditor there makes it really, really difficult for that to happen. So China's the same way, right? They have auditors running these, looking at these companies. And like when I was in Singapore, auditors were in there all the time. Like Singapore is like perhaps the least corrupt least corrupt country in the world when it comes to government as well as corporate compliance, because auditors are controlling everything. They're just always there in the office, just monitoring you. If you get big enough, if you post a profit that's large enough, an auditor check is automatically summoned. And I think it's the same way in America, actually. Yeah.
So now, typically, is this in between like Chinese company to Chinese company? What about an American company that's making its products over there?
I think it's registered in China, so it counts as a Chinese company.
Okay. So all of these are subject to that same credit score, right? Okay.
Right, yeah. It's the same way in, I think, most nationalized countries, right? Like Vietnam, for example, foreigners are not allowed to own a majority stake in any companies that they have. So let's say I'm Apple and I go to Vietnam, I have to find a local investor, and he has to be the majority stakeholder.
Right. It's interesting that so part of this it seems to be a little bit of a double-edged sword. So tell me, like, there was a company that makes globes, and they started to make their globes in China. Now, one of the problems with this was China was upset on how they have their globe, because there's certain contested areas with India that they claim, that India also claims. They also claim Taiwan, and there's 9 dashes around the South China Sea, which they kind of claim to be.
Yeah, they claim all those islands, yeah.
To own all those islands, right? I think the pescadors are part of those. But anyways, they would stop this because you're not allowed by Chinese law to make a map that's against this. So they want to pull out to move their business, right? Ironically, they end up going to Taiwan, but they have to pay all of these fees and monies just to get their equipment out. So it seems like there's a huge culture of bribes in China to get anything done.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder, do you think this would actually help that or potentially make it worse?
Could be both, right? I mean, like, if it's not properly enforced, if they don't crack down on their culture of corruption, then this whole system is going to be completely flipped over its head. And, people are going to bribe officials to have a better credit score, and that's not going to be very good, right? That's going to work out very poorly for China. And we've seen what happens when China does things poorly. They try to cover it up, and then things just get worse. Yeah, you get a coronavirus, for example, right?
Yeah.
And a reopening of the wet markets. And it's funny, you have a country that can I was watching Bill Maher earlier, where he said that it's funny, you have a country that can effectively stop people from having multiple children. You have a one-child per family policy, but they can't enforce this wet market thing.
Oh,
kind of strange, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I will correct him on that part. I'll say that a lot of Chinese families actually had more than one child, and they never got sterilized. It was just the poor people who got sterilized. That's how it worked out. All the rich families, all they did was have to pay a bribe.
Yeah.
That's how they made it. And nowadays, there's still a one-child per family policy, but if you're rich enough, all you have to do is pay a tax.
Yeah.
So rich people are educated people having lots of kids. Meanwhile, the poor people are not. And that is a wonderful way to get rid of idiocracy, I would say. So,
well, it seems like a lot of the upper middle class in China tend to like this credit score system because they're already primed for it, and it just sort of it seems like it gets the riffraff out of their way. It's a very elitist position.
It's a eugenics, right? It's a haves and have-not system. They might call themselves communists, but really, the system is the same. I mean, it's actually worse than capitalism anywhere else. I mean, under capitalism, you have this ability to have you've got upward mobility. You can be the poorest person living in the slum, but if you got the will and you got, the intellect or the connections, you can get pretty much anywhere you want. I mean, look at all these rap artists, right? They came from nowhere and now they're rich. You look at the My Pillow guy, right? He was a drug addict. He was a crack addict, and now he's not. So, he's a really great dude, right?
Yeah.
And that can only happen in America. It can only happen in places like Europe, I guess, but can't happen in China. In China, you got to start rich. You got to be a member of the political party. If you're poor, you're fucked for life, right? That's why a lot of Chinese people leave China to go to places like Taiwan. They go to places like Canada and America to find a better living because they can't do that in China. So this system actually makes it a lot worse because it actually deepens the divide between the rich and the poor. It
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you're poor, what can you do? You can just jack off to porn all day, right? That's pretty much it, right?
Well, I mean, right.
And your credit score's gonna be the shitter.
And the thing is, it sounds like the non-payment of bills is a big thing. Like companies stiffing other companies. In fact, Donald Trump's gotten picked off for not paying debts and stuff. Either way, and so there's trying to stop that, but it may not because I mean, can you game the system? It seems like the Communist Party didn't somebody say like, where's Xi Jinping's credit score? Social credit score.
Yeah.
Are we going to see their credit scores? And my guess is his is going to be perfect.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All the party members, all their scores are going to be perfect. It's going to be doctored. So this whole system is rigged. It's rigged from the get-go.
Yeah,
it sounds like a good idea, and if it was like say a machine implementing it in a country that was only run by an AI, for example, that'd be fine. I'd be okay with that, and maybe a lot of people wouldn't be because they like their freedom. I'm of the mind that if you could have like an amoral machine that only cares about humanity, it's just perfectly empathetic, and it's not like maybe Skynet because Skynet decided to kill people, but that's just bullshit science fiction that's designed to demonize technology, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is, right? And imagine a good system that is designed to protect humans. It wouldn't be such a bad thing, but we're talking about people here. People know how to game the system. They know how to work around it. So no, it's not going to work. It's going to be a really bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah.